What if the coin in your pocket right now is worth a fortune? A Mercury dime from the Roaring '20s, a Roosevelt with a hidden flaw, a Denver Mint error that slipped through undetected, each one a silent witness to history, each one hiding a secret that collectors would pay thousands to uncover. These tiny pieces of metal carry mysteries of artistry, error, and value that most people walk past every single day. One mistake at the mint, one overlooked detail, one forgotten coin. That is all it takes to turn pocket change into a life-changing discovery. The question is, do you already hold one and not even know it? The year was 1925, and the United States was in the midst of one of the most transformative and contradictory periods in its young history. The Great War had ended 7 years earlier, and the nation was now firmly in the grip of the Roaring '20s, a decade defined by jazz, speakeasies, flappers, and an almost feverish obsession with modernity and progress. Calvin Coolidge sat in the White House, having taken over after the sudden death of Warren G. Harding in 1923 and then winning a full term of his own in 1924. Coolidge was a man of few words and deep conservative convictions, famously declaring that the chief business of the American people was business, and under his leadership, the federal government took a decidedly hands-off approach to the economy. Taxes were slashed, regulations were stripped away, and the stock market began a dizzying climb that would captivate the entire nation. Factories were humming at record output, automobiles rolled off assembly lines in Detroit at a pace never before seen, and Henry Ford was producing Model T vehicles at the rate of one every few seconds. The middle class was expanding, home ownership was rising, and for the first time in history, millions of ordinary Americans had disposable income to spend on radios, phonographs, refrigerators, and other marvels of the new machine age. Yet beneath this glittering surface, deep tensions were brewing. The Ku Klux Klan had reached the height of its 20th century influence, with millions of members across the country and political power in several states. Immigration was a fiery political issue, culminating in the Immigration Act of 1924, which imposed strict quotas that dramatically limited entry from Southern and Eastern Europe and essentially barred Asians altogether. Prohibition was the law of the land, having been in effect since 1920, and instead of curing the nation of its social ills, it had birthed a vast criminal underworld of bootleggers, smugglers, and corrupt officials. The Scopes monkey trial would unfold later that very summer in Dayton, Tennessee, pitting modern science against religious fundamentalism in a courtroom spectacle that gripped the country. It was against this backdrop of roaring prosperity, cultural upheaval, political conservatism, and deep social division that the United States Mint continued its production of the Mercury dime, a coin that had first entered circulation 9 years earlier, but which remained a vital and ubiquitous piece of American daily life in 1925. The Mercury dime itself owed its existence to a sweeping artistic movement that had transformed American coinage starting in the early 1900s. For decades, United States coins had featured largely static and uninspiring designs, many of which had remained unchanged since the Civil War era. But a growing chorus of artists, politicians, and public figures began calling for something more beautiful, something that would reflect the rising stature of the United States on the world stage. President Theodore Roosevelt had been the great champion of this movement, famously declaring the existing coinage artistically atrocious and pushing for designs that would rival the beauty of ancient Greek and Renaissance European coins. Roosevelt enlisted the famed sculptor Augustus St. Gaudens to redesign the gold coinage, and the resulting St. Gaudens double eagle is still widely considered the most beautiful coin ever produced by the United States. This artistic renaissance eventually spread to the smaller denominations, and in 1916, the Mint turned to another sculptor, Adolf A. Weinmann, to redesign the dime. Weinmann was a German-born artist who had studied under St. Gaudens and had already established himself as one of the premier sculptors in the country. His design for the new dime featured a portrait of Liberty wearing a winged cap on the obverse, an image that immediately drew comparisons to the Roman god Mercury, and so the coin became popularly known as the Mercury dime, even though it was never officially called that. The reverse depicted a fasces, an ancient Roman symbol of authority and strength, paired with an olive branch representing peace. The imagery was deliberate and meaningful, designed to project American power and a desire for peace as the nation watched the Great War consume Europe. By 1925, the Mercury dime had been in production for nearly a decade and was a familiar sight in the pockets and purses of millions of Americans. It was a coin of the people, used for everything from a loaf of bread to a streetcar ride to a newspaper. In an era before credit cards and widespread checking accounts, coins were the lifeblood of everyday commerce, and the dime occupied a crucial place in the monetary ecosystem. It was small enough to carry in abundance, but valuable enough to purchase real goods, and in 1925, a single dime could buy a bottle of Coca-Cola, a ride on a city bus, or a ticket to a Saturday matinee at the local picture house. The coin passed through the hands of factory workers and bankers, shopkeepers and schoolchildren, immigrants and native-born citizens alike, and in doing so it became a quiet but constant reminder of the shared economic life of the nation. The 1925 Mercury dime was struck at 3 different mint facilities across the United States: the Philadelphia Mint, the Denver Mint, and the San Francisco Mint, and each location produced the coin in different quantities that would ultimately shape the rarity landscape for collectors in the decades to come. The Philadelphia Mint, as the primary facility, produced the largest mintage by far, with over 59 million dimes bearing no mint mark, making the Philadelphia issue the most common of the 3 for that year. The Denver Mint produced a respectable but smaller mintage of approximately 5 million coins, marked with a small D on the reverse, and these are moderately scarce today but still attainable for most collectors. The true rarity of the 1925 Mercury dime, however, comes from the San Francisco Mint, which struck only about 2.5 million dimes that year, marked with a small S on the reverse. This was a relatively low mintage even by the standards of the era, and the San Francisco dimes from 1925 have become one of the more sought-after issues in the entire Mercury dime series. But mintage numbers alone do not tell the full story of why these coins became rare. The Mercury dime, like all silver coins of its era, was made from an alloy of 90% silver and 10% copper, which meant that the coin itself had intrinsic metal value. During the Great Depression that followed the stock market crash of 1929, many silver coins were hoarded or melted, and later during World War II. When the United States faced critical shortages of strategic metals, untold millions of silver coins were melted down for their metal content to support the war effort. Additionally, the simple passage of time took its toll, as coins in circulation wore down, were lost, were damaged, or simply disappeared into the vast economy. The coins that survived in uncirculated condition, never having entered commerce at all, are exceptionally rare, because in 1925 there was little reason for anyone to set aside a common dime. Coin collecting as a widespread hobby was still in its relative infancy, and most people who handled a freshly minted dime simply spent it. Only a handful of collectors, bankers, and mint employees had the foresight to preserve pristine examples, and those surviving specimens are the foundation of the high-grade population that exists today. Today, the surviving population of 1925 Mercury dimes varies dramatically depending on the mint of origin and the condition of the coin. For the Philadelphia issue, circulated examples are quite common and can be found in grades ranging from good to extremely fine for roughly $3 to $15, making them accessible to virtually any collector. Uncirculated Philadelphia examples in mint state grades begin around $50 for lower mint state grades and can climb to several $100s for premium uncirculated specimens. The Denver issue is notably scarcer, with circulated examples fetching $10 to $40 and uncirculated examples ranging from $100 to several $100s depending on the grade. The San Francisco issue is where the real value lies, as it is the key rarity of the year. Circulated San Francisco dimes from 1925 typically command anywhere from $25 to $100 depending on condition, while uncirculated examples can range from $500 to several $1,000s, and the finest known specimens, those graded mint state 66 or higher with full split bands on the fasces, can command prices well into the five figures at auction. The full split bands designation is critical for top-tier Mercury dime values, as it refers to the level of detail on the horizontal bands wrapped around the fasces on the reverse of the coin, and only coins struck from the sharpest dies with the highest quality planchets retain this level of detail. A 1925 San Francisco Mercury dime graded at the absolute pinnacle of preservation, with full split bands and pristine surfaces, is among the most coveted and valuable coins in the entire Mercury dime series, and when such a specimen appears at auction, it draws intense interest from the most serious collectors in the numismatic world. Beyond its monetary value, the 1925 Mercury dime endures as a tangible artifact of one of the most fascinating and consequential eras in American history, a small silver disc that was touched by the hands of people living through the Roaring Twenties, people who could not have known that the prosperity surrounding them would soon collapse into the worst economic catastrophe the nation had ever faced. Holding one of these coins today is holding a piece of that vanished world, a world of jazz and bootleg liquor, of Model T Fords and radio broadcasts, of a young nation bursting with confidence and blind to the storm that was coming, and that connection to the past is something no price tag can truly capture. In 1998, the United States Mint was operating at full capacity across its three production facilities in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, churning out billions of coins to meet the demands of a booming late 20th century economy. The Roosevelt dime had been in production since 1946, originally created to honor President Franklin Delano Roosevelt following his death in 1945, and by the late 1990s, it had become one of the most familiar and unremarkable coins in everyday circulation. The process of making a dime begins long before any metal is struck, starting with the creation of the design itself. An artist at the Mint sculpts a large plaster model of the obverse and reverse, sometimes 3 feet in diameter, and this model is then photographed and reduced through a pantograph machine, or in more modern times, through digital scanning and engraving technology to produce a master hub. The master hub is a single positive image of the coin design, and it is pressed into a blank piece of steel under enormous pressure to create a working hub, which is also a positive image. This working hub is then pressed into another piece of steel to create a working die, which is a negative image, meaning the design is in cues or recessed into the steel. When this working die is subsequently pressed into a blank planchet, which is a smooth disc of metal that has been cut from a long strip of clad material, the negative image transfers onto the positive surface of the coin, producing the raised design elements that we see on finished coins. The planchets themselves are composed of a sandwich of metals, a pure copper core with outer layers of a copper-nickel alloy, giving the dime its characteristic silvery appearance while keeping production costs low. In 1998, the Philadelphia Mint alone produced over 1 billion Roosevelt dimes, and with such staggering volume, the quality control process, while rigorous, could not catch every subtle anomaly that occurred on the production floor. The specific error that makes certain 1998 Roosevelt dimes rare and valuable is known as a doubled die, and it occurs during the hubbing stage of die creation rather than during the actual striking of individual coins. When a working die is being created, the working hub is pressed into the steel die blank, and under normal circumstances, this is done in a single, perfectly aligned impression. However, if the hub is removed from the die blank and then reinserted at even a fractionally different angle, even a degree or less, the second impression will leave a slightly offset duplicate image in the steel. This means that every single coin subsequently struck from that die will carry the doubled image, and unlike a single coin error such as an off-center strike or a clipped planchet, a doubled die can produce thousands of affected coins before the die is retired or the error is noticed. In the case of the 1998 Roosevelt dime, the doubled die obverse variety is most prominently visible on the lettering along the upper rim of the coin, specifically on the words "In God We Trust and Liberty," as well as on the date itself. The doubling appears as a clear, separated shadow image alongside the primary lettering, giving the text a thickened or split appearance when examined under magnification. On the strongest examples, the doubling on the word trust is particularly dramatic, with the letters T and R showing a clear horizontal separation that almost looks like two overlapping sets of text. The date, 1998, also shows separation most noticeably on the digits 9 and 8, where a secondary ghost image can be seen slightly to the side of the primary number. This is not the same as mechanical doubling or machine doubling, which is caused by a loose die shifting during the striking of a single coin and produces a flat shelf like doubling rather than the distinct, separated contour doubling of a true doubled die created during the hubbing process. The distinction is critical because machine doubling is common and adds no premium value, while a true doubled die from the hubbing process is a genuine mint error that can significantly increase the worth of the coin. The reason this doubled die went unnoticed at the time of production is rooted in the sheer scale and speed of modern minting operations. In 1998, the Philadelphia Mint was using high-speed coining presses capable of striking hundreds of coins per minute, and the primary quality concern was detecting broad categories of defects such as filled dies, cracked dies, or off-center strikes that would be immediately obvious to the naked eye. A doubled die of the subtlety found on the 1998 Roosevelt dime required magnification to properly identify, and the quality control inspectors on the production floor were focused on ensuring that coins met basic standards of strike quality, weight, and visual acceptability at a glance, not on examining individual dies under magnification for microscopic doubling. Furthermore, the doubling on this particular variety is not immediately obvious to the untrained eye, especially on a coin as small as the dime, which measures only 17.91 millimeters in diameter. The average person handling a Roosevelt dime in everyday commerce would never notice the slight shadowing on the lettering, and even many coin collectors might overlook it, unless they were specifically examining the coin under a loupe or microscope. The error was only discovered after collectors began submitting 1998 dimes to professional grading services for authentication and encapsulation, and the grading services, which examine coins under magnification as part of their standard process, began to identify a consistent pattern of doubling on coins from a specific die pair. Once the variety was recognized and publicized in numismatic publications and online collector communities, people began searching through their pocket change and old coin collections for examples. But by that point, the vast majority of the affected coins had already been in circulation for years, accumulating wear, scratches, and tunning that diminished their condition and value. The estimated surviving population of the 1998 Roosevelt dime doubled die obverse is difficult to pin down with absolute precision, but numismatic researchers and grading service population reports suggest that perhaps several thousand examples exist across all grades, with the majority being in circulated condition showing significant wear. The die that produced this variety likely struck somewhere in the range of 50,000 to 100,000 coins before it was retired from service, which was a typical lifespan for a working die in the late 1990s, and of those struck coins, many were lost, damaged or worn beyond recognition in the decades following their release. The coins that were pulled from circulation early, either by chance or by an attentive collector, are the ones that retain the most value, and the condition grade assigned by professional services such as the Professional Coin Grading Service or the Numismatic Guaranteeing Corporation is the single most important factor in determining what an individual example is worth. For circulated examples, which typically grade in the range of extremely fine to about uncirculated, the value is relatively modest, generally falling between $5 and $25, reflecting the fact that the doubling is still visible, but the overall eye appeal is diminished by wear and contact marks. Uncirculated examples, those that never entered general circulation and retain their original mint luster, begin at around $50 in lower mint state grades, such as mint state 63, and climb steadily as the grade increases. A coin graded mint state 65 which shows minimal contact marks and strong luster, might bring $100 to $200, while a specimen graded mint state 66, which is quite rare for this variety, could command $300 to $500 or more depending on the strength and visibility of the doubling. The absolute finest known examples of the 1998 Roosevelt dime doubled die obverse, those graded mint state 67 or higher with exceptional eye appeal, full blazing luster, and razor-sharp doubling that is immediately apparent even under low magnification, are exceedingly rare and can command prices well above $1,000 when they appear at auction, particularly if they are also designated with a full bands designation, indicating that the horizontal bands on the torch on the reverse are fully separated and struck with complete definition. The full bands designation is important for all Roosevelt dimes, but takes on added significance for era varieties, because it demonstrates that the coin was not only struck from the doubled die, but was also struck from a fresh, sharp pair of dies with optimal pressure, meaning it represents the best possible combination of era and quality. Collectors who specialize in modern United States mint eras prize these coins not just for their monetary value, but for the story they tell about the manufacturing process. A story of how a tiny misalignment during the hubbing of a single steel die in a factory in Philadelphia produced a lasting and detectable fingerprint on thousands of small silver discs that were scattered across the country into cash registers, piggy banks, and parking meters. The 1998 Roosevelt dime doubled die obverse stands as a reminder that even in an age of computerized precision and automated quality control, the ancient mechanical process of striking coins still produces moments of human error that become treasures for those patient and observant enough to find them. And every time someone picks up a dime and examines it closely under a magnifying glass, they are participating in a tradition of discovery that connects them directly to the men and women who operated those presses and shaped those dies in a factory on the other side of the country more than a quarter century ago. The face on every Roosevelt dime ever struck, including those produced in the year 2007, begins with a story of national mourning and artistic purpose that traces back to the spring of 1945. Franklin Delano Roosevelt had been President of the United States for over 12 years, longer than any person before or since, and under his leadership, the nation had endured the worst economic collapse in its history and emerged victorious from the most devastating global conflict the world had ever witnessed. When he passed away on April 12th of that year at his retreat in Warm Springs, Georgia, the wave of grief that swept across the country was unlike anything Americans had experienced since the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. People wept openly in the streets, factories fell silent, and within days the government began searching for a permanent way to honor his memory on the nation coinage. The dime was chosen as the vessel for this tribute because of its intimate connection to Roosevelt's most beloved public health initiative, the March of Dimes, which had raised millions of dollars in the fight against polio, a disease that had struck Roosevelt himself in 1921 and robbed him of the use of his legs for the remainder of his life. The decision to place him on the dime was made swiftly, and the responsibility for creating the design fell to John Ray Sinnock, the chief engraver of the United States Mint at that time. Sinnock was a quiet, meticulous man born in 1888 in the city of Philadelphia, where he spent nearly his entire life immersed in the world of art and metalwork. He had trained at the Philadelphia Museum School of Industrial Art, one of the premier art institutions in the country, and had developed a reputation as a master of low-relief sculpture and medallic art, a discipline that requires an artist to convey depth, emotion, and detail within an extraordinarily shallow physical space. Before joining the Mint staff in 1917 as an assistant engraver, Sinnock had studied under some of the most accomplished sculptors of the American Renaissance, a cultural movement that sought to bring the grandeur and refinement of European classical art to distinctly American subjects and settings. He was deeply influenced by the Beaux-Arts tradition, which emphasized formal balance, clean geometric composition, and idealized but recognizable portraiture, and he had also absorbed the lessons of his mentor James Earl Fraser, the creator of the iconic Buffalo nickel, who taught him that a coin design must be both beautiful and legible at the smallest scale. Sinek had already proven his ability to translate monumental sculpture into miniature form through his work on the Benjamin Franklin half-dollar, and when the Roosevelt dime project was handed to him in the summer of 1945, he approached it with a sense of solemn duty, knowing that this tiny canvas would carry the image of a man who had transformed the nation. The obverse of the Roosevelt dime, which has remained essentially unchanged from its introduction through the 2007 issues and all the years between, is a masterwork of compressed portraiture that rewards close examination with a magnifying lens. Roosevelt is presented in left-facing profile, his head turned slightly so that the viewer sees the strong line of his jaw, the determined set of his chin, and the broad sweep of his forehead. His expression is one of quiet resolve, neither smiling nor stern, but composed in a way that suggests a man bearing enormous weight with steady dignity. His hair is sculpted in finely detailed waves that flow back from his temple, each strand individually rendered with delicate engraving lines that catch light differently depending on the angle of viewing, creating a subtle sense of movement and life within the rigid medium of metal. Above his portrait, arching along the upper rim of the coin, are the words Liberty in bold capital letters, and the lettering is executed in a clean Roman style that reflects Sinek classical training. To the lower left of the portrait, directly beneath the word Liberty, sits the motto "In God We Trust," and to the lower right of Roosevelt chin appears the date of minting, which on the 2007 issue reads as the 4-digit year. The designer's initials, JS, appear as tiny letters tucked into the truncation of the bust, just below the point where the neck meets the lower rim, and these two small letters have been the subject of controversy and conspiracy theory for decades, with some critics in the 1940s falsely claiming they stood for Joseph Stalin, an accusation that was utterly baseless but persisted in certain political circles for years. The rim of the coin is bordered by a raised denticled edge, a ring of small tooth-like projections that serves both a decorative and practical function, protecting the central design from wear and helping the coin stack uniformly in counting machines and bank rolls. When examining a 2007 Roosevelt dime obverse, a collector should look for sharpness in the hair details above Roosevelt ear, full separation in the letters of Liberty, and a clean, unbroken date, because these are the areas where wear first becomes visible and where the quality of the strike is most apparent. The reverse of the Roosevelt dime is where Sinek design reaches its fullest artistic expression, and it is also the side that most directly connects the coin to the values and legacy that Roosevelt championed throughout his presidency. At the center of the reverse stands a torch, tall and upright, its flame rendered with flowing vertical lines that suggest heat and light radiating upward and outward. To the left of the torch is an olive branch with several leaves, a classical symbol of peace that traces back to ancient Greek and Roman art, and to the right is an oak branch with acorns, representing strength and endurance. The combination of these three elements, the torch of freedom, the olive branch of peace, and the oak branch of strength, was a deliberate and deeply meaningful composition that encapsulated the core principles of Roosevelt presidency and the values he had articulated in his famous Four Freedoms speech: the freedom of speech, the freedom of worship, the freedom from want, and the freedom from fear. Encircling this central composition, arranged along the rim, are the words United States of America across the top and the denomination 1 dime along the bottom, with the motto E pluribus unum, meaning out of many one, positioned to the left of the torch. The spacing and proportion of all these elements are carefully calculated to fit within the tiny circular field without crowding or imbalance, and Sinek achieved this through his mastery of negative space. The empty areas around and between the raised design elements that give the eye room to rest and allow each component to stand distinct. When examining the reverse of a 2007 Roosevelt dime, the most critical detail to inspect is the torch itself, specifically the two horizontal bands that wrap around the center of the torch handle. These bands, when struck with full force from a fresh, sharp die, show complete separation between the upper and lower portions, and this characteristic is known in the collecting community as full bands. A Roosevelt dime with full bands is worth significantly more than one without, because achieving full separation in those bands requires a perfectly centered strike with optimal pressure on a high-quality planchet, and only a fraction of the total mintage meets this standard. The rarity and desirability of the 2007 Roosevelt dime is shaped by several intersecting factors that transform what was originally a common circulating coin into a collectible with real and sometimes surprising value. In 2007, the United States Mint struck Roosevelt dimes at the Philadelphia and Denver facilities for general circulation, producing well over 2 billion coins combined across both mints, which means that ordinary circulated examples are abundant and carry no premium above face value. However, the Mint also produced special proof versions at the San Francisco facility, where coins are struck on highly polished planchets using specially prepared dies, often struck multiple times to ensure maximum detail and a mirror-like field, and these proof dimes were sold to collectors in sealed sets. The 2007 San Francisco Proof Roosevelt dime is the most desirable standard issue from that year, with a surviving population in the tens of thousands across all proof grades, and values range from about $3 for a basic proof in its original government packaging to perhaps $15 or $20 for a deep cameo proof graded at the highest end of the scale, where the frosted portrait and torch stand in dramatic contrast against the dark mirrored background. Beyond the proof issues, the true rarities of the 2007 dime are error coins, pieces that experienced some mechanical failure or human mistake during the production process and escaped the mint undetected. The most notable of these is the 2007 Roosevelt dime struck on a wrong planchet, where a dime die was fed a blank intended for a different denomination, such as a penny planchet or a foreign coin blank, resulting in a coin with the wrong metal composition, wrong weight, and often an incomplete or off-center strike. These wrong planchet errors are extraordinarily rare, with perhaps only a handful known to exist for the 2007 date, and they can command prices ranging from several $100s in damaged condition to several $1,000s in pristine, fully graded condition. Another sought-after error from this year is the broad strike, where the collar die that normally holds the planchet in place during striking fails to function, allowing the coin to spread outward beyond its normal diameter and producing a thin, wide disc with an expanded but complete design. Broad strike errors from 2007 typically sell for $20 to $100 depending on condition and the degree of expansion. For collectors of standard circulation strikes, the value hierarchy is determined almost entirely by grade and the full bands designation, with a Mint State 63 full bands example worth perhaps $5, a Mint State 65 full bands worth around $15, and a Mint State 67 full bands, which is exceptionally rare for a modern clad dime, potentially bringing $50 to $100 or more at auction. The combination of scenic timeless design, the historical weight of Roosevelt legacy, and the enduring challenge of finding flawless examples of a coin produced in the billions ensures that the 2007 Roosevelt dime remains a meaningful and rewarding pursuit for collectors at every level, from a child examining pocket change to a seasoned numismatist seeking the finest known specimen in existence. The story of the rare 2014 Denver Roosevelt dime begins on the production floor of the United States Mint facility in Denver, Colorado, where billions of clad dimes were being struck that year for circulation across the nation. The Denver Mint, which had been operating since 1906 and had served as one of the primary coin production facilities for the United States for over a century, was in 2014 running at extraordinary capacity, churning out coins for a growing economy that demanded constant replenishment of pocket change. The Roosevelt dime had been in continuous production since 1946, and by 2014 the design was so familiar that most Americans never gave it a second glance. The Denver Mint alone produced over 1 billion dimes that year, each one identical in appearance to the untrained eye, each one bearing the left-facing portrait of Franklin Delano Roosevelt on the obverse, and the torch with olive and oak branches on the reverse, each one marked with a small D mint mark on the obverse side. But among those billions of coins, a small number emerged from the coining presses with a dramatic and visible error that would eventually capture the attention of the numismatic world. During the production run, one or more working dies developed a significant crack that propagated from the rim of the die inward across the field and into the portrait of Roosevelt himself. Die cracks are a natural part of the minting process, occurring when the tremendous pressure of repeated strikes causes microscopic fractures in the steel surface of the die. And under normal circumstances, the mint would detect these cracks during routine quality inspections and replace the affected die before it could produce a large number of defective coins. However, in this instance, the cracked die continued striking coins for a period of time before it was caught and removed from service, and the coins it produced carried a raised line of displaced metal running across the face of Roosevelt, creating a dramatic and unmistakable visual anomaly that collectors would later nickname the bleeding forehead variety. These coins were swept up in the normal flow of mint production, bagged, rolled, and shipped to Federal Reserve banks across the country, where they entered general circulation alongside millions of ordinary dimes, indistinguishable to the casual observer but marked with a flaw that would make them extraordinary. The journey of these era coins from the Denver Mint into the hands of collectors is a story of chance, persistence, and the obsessive dedication of a small community of people who spend their lives searching through ordinary money for extraordinary treasures. In the months following the release of 2014 Denver dimes into circulation, a handful of coin enthusiasts across the United States began noticing something unusual in their pocket change and in rolls of dimes purchased from local banks. The first widely reported discovery came from a collector in the southwestern United States who had purchased several unsearched rolls of dimes from a regional bank and was examining them under a magnifying lens when he spotted a dime with a prominent raised line crossing the forehead of Roosevelt from the rim to the hairline. He initially suspected it was post-mint damage, a scratch applied to the coin after it left the mint. But upon closer examination under higher magnification, he realized that the line was raised rather than incised, meaning it had been formed during the striking process itself when metal from the planchet had flowed into a crack in the die surface. He submitted the coin to a major third-party grading service for authentication, and after expert examination, it was confirmed as a genuine mint error, a die crack variety that had been produced at the Denver Mint and had somehow escaped the quality control process. Once the authentication was published in numismatic journals and discussed on online coin forums, other collectors began searching their own 2014 Denver dimes, and within a few months, several more examples had surfaced from different parts of the country, each one showing the same characteristic raised line across Roosevelt forehead, confirming that a single cracked die had produced multiple error coins before being retired. The provenance of each discovered example became a matter of careful record keeping, with collectors documenting where and when they found each coin, what condition it was in, and how it was authenticated and graded. Some of the earliest discovered examples were found in circulated condition, showing the wear and tear of having passed through countless hands in cash registers, vending machines, and pockets, and these coins bore the scars of their time in commerce, with softened details and visible abrasions that diminished their visual appeal, but not their historical significance. Other examples were found in uncirculated condition, presumably having been set aside shortly after minting, perhaps by a bank teller or a collector who received a fresh roll and noticed something unusual before the coins could enter active circulation. And these pristine examples became the most coveted specimens in the emerging market for this variety. As the 2014 Denver Roosevelt dime die crack variety gained recognition within the numismatic community, a small but passionate market developed around it, and the ownership history of the finest known examples began to take shape through a series of private sales, online auctions, and exchanges between specialist collectors. The earliest authenticated example, graded by a major professional service in uncirculated condition with full bands on the reverse torch, was acquired by a well-known era coin specialist who had built a reputation over decades for identifying and preserving rare modern mint eras. This collector, who maintained one of the most comprehensive collections of Roosevelt dime varieties in private hands, recognized the significance of the bleeding forehead variety immediately and reportedly paid several $100s for the first confirmed example, a price that seemed extraordinary for a modern dime, but that reflected the genuine rarity and visual drama of the piece. From there, the variety began appearing in major era coin auctions, where it attracted bids from a small circle of dedicated variety collectors and era specialists who understood that modern mint eras of this visibility and quality were exceptionally rare given the advanced quality control systems in place at contemporary mint facilities. One of the most dramatic moments in the provenance history of this variety occurred when two collectors both claimed to have discovered the first authenticated example, leading to a spirited but ultimately amicable dispute that was resolved through the examination of grading service submission records, which confirmed the timeline of when each coin had been submitted and by whom. No formal legal battles emerged from this disagreement, but the episode highlighted the importance of documentation and provenance in the world of rare coin collecting, where the story of a coin discovery can add as much value as the coin itself. Several of the finest known examples changed hands through private treaty sales arranged through coin dealers who specialized in modern eras, and the identities of some of the buyers have been kept confidential at their request, a common practice among high net worth collectors who prefer to maintain privacy around their holdings. At least one example was reportedly lost for a period of time when a collector who had found it in circulation placed it in a desk drawer and forgot about it for over a year before rediscovering it during a move and realizing what he had. A reminder that even in the modern era of instant communication and online databases, remarkable coins can still hide in plain sight. The current surviving population of the 2014 Denver Roosevelt dime bleeding forehead variety is estimated by numismatic researchers to be somewhere between 50 and 150 examples across all conditions, though the exact number is difficult to determine with certainty because not every existing example has been submitted to a grading service for authentication and encapsulation. The grading service population reports, which track the number of coins certified at each grade level, show only a small number of confirmed examples, with the majority grading in circulated conditions ranging from very fine to about uncirculated, reflecting the fact that most of these coins spent time in general commerce before being recognized and removed from circulation. The value of these circulated examples is modest but meaningful for a modern coin, typically ranging from $10 to $35 depending on the severity of the die crack, the overall condition of the coin, and whether the full bands designation is present on the reverse. Uncirculated examples are considerably scarcer and more valuable, with mint state 63 and 64 examples generally trading in the range of $50 to $125, and mint state 65 examples commanding perhaps $150 to $250. The finest known examples, those graded mint state 66 or higher with full bands and a particularly strong, well-defined die crack that is immediately visible to the naked eye, are exceedingly rare, with perhaps fewer than 10 examples believed to exist at that level. And these top-tier specimens have been sold privately for prices ranging from $500 to over $1,000, depending on the strength of the era and the visual appeal of the individual coin. The ownership of the finest known examples is concentrated among a small group of dedicated Roosevelt dime variety collectors, several of whom have spent years assembling comprehensive collections of every known modern era and variety in the series, and these collections are occasionally displayed at major numismatic conventions where they attract significant attention from fellow collectors and the general public alike. The 2014 Denver Roosevelt Dime Die Crack variety stands as a testament to the enduring thrill of coin collecting, a reminder that even in an age of computerized minting and automated quality inspection, the ancient and imperfect process of striking metal discs with engraved steel dies still produces moments of error that become treasures. And that the journey of a single coin from a production line in Denver to a collector's display case can be as dramatic and compelling as the story of any ancient artifact, because every coin carries within it the story of its creation, its passage through the world, and the people who recognized its worth when others looked right past it.